Some shows pass through television. Others stay permanently, woven into how entire generations understood adolescence, belonging, and what warmth actually felt like. Happy Days was that second kind. A Milwaukee built from diner counters, kitchen tables, and the firm belief that goodness deserved celebrating. Nearly 6 decades have passed since those first episodes aired, and the cast has scattered into very different futures. Some are still with us, some departed far too soon, and all of them remain frozen in the world of reruns that refuses to release them. Richie Cunningham was the compass the whole ensemble relied on. Steady, trustworthy, and grounded in ways louder characters never needed to be. Ron Howard, born March 1, 1954, in Duncan, Oklahoma, was just 20 when he stepped into the role. He carried Richie without ego, offering audiences someone to believe in rather than admire. Through his eyes, adolescence felt honest. Friendships forming carefully, mistakes absorbed quietly, identity taking shape in a world still gentle enough to allow it. When Howard left the series, he rebuilt entirely. The actor became a filmmaker of serious ambition, eventually earning recognition as one of the most accomplished directors of his generation. In 2026, Ron Howard is 72. Watching Richie now, it's hard not to sense the enormous life already quietly beginning behind those unassuming eyes. Arthur Fonzarelli was a minor character on paper. Henry Winkler turned him into the series' defining force. Born October 30, 1945, in New York City, Winkler was 29 when he first wore the jacket, grasping immediately that swagger without depth fades quickly. He gave Fonzie a private interior, someone raised outside of warmth, slowly learning how to accept a family's affection without flinching. Every gesture carried that hidden history, whether audiences consciously registered it or not. That invisible foundation is precisely why the character outlasted the decade. Winkler continued growing as a performer long after the show left primetime. In 2026, Henry Winkler is 80. The legend holds, not because of any catchphrase, but because of everything placed carefully in the silences surrounding it. Marion Cunningham didn't fill scenes. She anchored them, making every surrounding character feel more real in the process. Marian Ross, born October 25, 1928, in Watertown, Minnesota, was 46 when she first took the role, approaching it as a person rather than a symbol. Tired on some days, proud on others, occasionally stretched thin, consistently loving, never performing any of it. That lived-in texture is difficult to sustain across a long run, and Ross held it without a visible seam. In a series built on nostalgic comfort, she was the interior that made the comfort credible. A simple line, delivered with her precision, could carry more weight than any scripted speech. In 2026, Marian Ross is 97, still present, a living reminder of what television once understood about home. Joni Cunningham began at the edges of someone else's story and gradually became irreplaceable. Erin Moran, born October 18, 1960, in Burbank, California, was just 14 when she first appeared, bringing an unconstructed authenticity to adolescence that no coaching produces. As the show evolved, so did Joni, eventually anchoring a romance compelling enough to carry its own spin-off series. Moran made every stage of that progression feel natural and deserved. But the years beyond television brought genuine hardship, distant from any network's warmth. On April 22, 2017, Erin Moran passed away at 56 from complications from cancer. That loss carried a particular grief for audiences who had spent years watching her become who she was. In every rerun, she remains exactly that person, unfinished, unforgettable, and impossibly young. Ralph Malph operated at full volume and somehow never exhausted his welcome, because Don Most gave the character a generosity of spirit that absorbed all the noise. Born August 8, 1953 in Brooklyn, New York, Most was 21 when he created Ralph, building the character's recklessness from youthful impulse rather than calculated performance. The humor never sharpened into cruelty. Ralph acted before thinking and failed loudly in ways audiences recognized from their own adolescence, which kept him likable long past the point the joke should have expired. After the series, Most moved into music, directing, and voice work, demonstrating range extending well beyond one corner booth. In 2026, Don Most is 72. The noise has quieted considerably over the years. The warmth underneath it never did. Potsie Weber was never going to be the coolest person at Arnold's, and Anson Williams made that the entire point. Born April 25, 1949 in Los Angeles, California, Williams was 25 when he gave Potsie a goodwill so genuine it quietly became the ensemble's foundation. The Fonz generated the mythology. Ralph generated the disorder. Potsie generated the sense that these were real people who had actually chosen each other. Williams played his character's stumbles with timing that made them funny without making Potsie an object of ridicule. Holding that line across many seasons is harder than it appears. He later moved fully behind the camera, building a substantial directing career. In 2026, Anson Williams is 76. The most understated member of the gang, still standing, still part of the story. Chachi arrived carrying the energy of someone who hasn't yet discovered his own limits. Scott Baio, born September 22, 1960 in Brooklyn, was only 17 when the character first appeared, and at that age, the restlessness required no performance. Chachi shifted the show's temperature entirely. Earlier seasons ran on family warmth. Chachi introduced something raw, teenage longing, real conflict, the ache of wanting more than the present moment contains. His dynamic with Joni generated enough pull to sustain a full spin-off series. Baio continued working across subsequent decades, though his public story grew increasingly complicated with time. In 2026, Scott Baio is 65. On screen, the character remains fixed in that late 70s intensity, young, driven, convinced everything he wants is one more scene away. Howard Cunningham never needed a spotlight. The warmth simply emanated from him without visible effort. Tom Bosley, born October 1, 1927 in Chicago, Illinois, was 47 when he brought the character to life, offering the series something it needed without always naming it, the feeling that the world had a reliable center. Howard was the person still standing when the episode ended, firm without coldness, quietly funny without undermining the warmth. Bosley made that combination appear effortless, which is how the finest performances in these roles always work. His career extended well beyond the series, yet Howard Cunningham became his most enduring contribution. On October 19, 2010, Tom Bosley passed away at 83 from complications of lung cancer. A presence that steady and that genuine is, it turns out, genuinely rare. Arnold's drive-in needed a soul, and Pat Morita provided one without appearing to try. Born June 28, 1932 in Ileton, California, Morita was 43 when he took the role, bringing dry authority and unforced warmth that transformed the setting from a convenient backdrop into somewhere genuinely inhabited. Without him behind that counter, Arnold's was scenery. With him, it had a pulse every surrounding character instinctively responded to. His measured stillness gave neighboring performances somewhere real to land. A later generation discovered him as Mr. Miyagi, but that capacity for quiet authority was already fully visible in Milwaukee. On November 24, 2005, Pat Morita died at 73 due to kidney failure. The setting he gave meaning to plays on. The person who gave it meaning does not. Al Del Vecchio was the observer. the man behind the counter who had long since made peace with being the only adult in the room. Al Molinaro, born June 24, 1919, in Kenosha, Wisconsin, was 55 when he stepped into the role. His deadpan reactions became one of the show's most dependable instruments. Comedy requires witnesses, people who respond to chaos rather than generate it. Molinaro understood that instinctively, and his expressions gave every surrounding performance a credible reference point. Without him, the antics floated free of grounding. With him, they landed somewhere real. His television work extended well beyond Happy Days. On October 29, 2015, Al Molinaro died at 96 from complications following gallbladder surgery. The witness is gone. What he observed runs on without him. Jenny Piccolo arrived when the show had already run long enough for any newcomer to feel like an intrusion, and immediately felt like she had always been there. Kathy Silvers, born May 27, 1961, in New York City, was 19 when she stepped into the role, delivering an energy that refreshed the dynamic without unsettling it. Jenny was vivid without sacrificing substance, which is harder in a sitcom's later seasons than it sounds. Silvers gave her enough dimension that audiences remembered Jenny as a genuine addition rather than a placeholder. After the show, she maintained a connection to the legacy, returning occasionally for devoted fans. In 2026, Kathy Silvers is 64. A late arrival, yes, but one with a lasting and entirely legitimate claim on the memory. Walking into a beloved series as an unfamiliar face is one of television's less forgiving assignments. Ted McGinley, born May 30, 1958, in Newport Beach, California, was 22 when he took on Roger Phillips, navigating that pressure by making the character's good intentions more visible than his awkwardness. Roger wasn't a replacement. He was someone genuinely attempting to find footing in an already established room. McGinley played that without self-consciousness, which allowed Roger's decency to read as charm rather than desperation. He subsequently built one of television's more recognizable careers, reappearing reliably across different decades and different comedies. In 2026, Ted McGinley is 67. Watching Roger now, you feel the atmosphere of a series composing its final chapters, still welcoming, still making space, moving warmly toward its own conclusion. Ashley Pfister raised a question. Happy Days hadn't previously considered worth asking. What does Fonzie look like when the performance stops? Linda Purl, born September 2, 1955 in Greenwich, Connecticut, was 19 when she appeared, carrying a composed assurance that made the question feel worth sitting with. Ashley wasn't a flirtation or a brief arc. She was a real possibility. A glimpse of ordinary life for someone the show had always treated as exempt from it. Purl played it with an intelligence that didn't pursue the audience's attention, but held it completely once it arrived. After the series, she built a varied and enduring career across television and film. In 2026, Linda Purl is 70. Those scenes still carry the weight of a possibility gently raised and never quite resolved. By the time Flip Phillips appeared, Happy Days was already composing its farewell. Billy Warlock, born March 26, 1961 in Gardena, California, was 21 when he joined, bringing a relaxed good humor that suited the show's closing atmosphere without pressuring viewers still attached to earlier faces. That was the essential task: be present without demanding to matter. Warlock handled it with the right instinct, keeping Flip genuine and approachable, never overreaching for significance the character wasn't built to carry. After the series, he continued in television before eventually stepping away from acting altogether. In 2026, Billy Warlock is 65. Watching those scenes brings a quiet melancholy, not for the character, but for what they represented. A show facing its ending and choosing, deliberately, to greet it with warmth. K.C. Cunningham arrived during the show's final seasons, when the challenge was no longer introducing new energy, but preserving what already existed. Crystal Bernard, born September 30th, 1961, in Garland, Texas, was 21 when she appeared, making K.C. feel like someone who had always occupied that space rather than someone placed there to fill a gap. There was a natural ease to her presence that resisted the awkwardness typical of late additions. She fit the household's rhythm without straining for it. Bernard's subsequent career confirmed K.C. was a beginning rather than an afterthought, as she became widely recognized through Wings. In 2026, Crystal Bernard is 64. Those closing scenes feel like a slow exhale, a series quietly aware the story is nearly over. Marcia Sims didn't need a grand entrance. She arrived quietly and accomplished something few guest characters manage. She made the lead feel genuinely new. Beatrice Colen, born January 10, 1948 in New York City, was 26 when she appeared alongside Fonzie, bringing an emotional clarity that briefly stripped away the mythology and revealed a man capable of real vulnerability. That shift is subtle inside a sitcom, but its effect outlasts far louder moments. It reminds you there is a full human being inside even the most iconic screen presence. Colen continued working in television after the show. On November 18, 1999, she died at 51 from breast cancer, far too early. Every scene she appears in now carries that knowledge, brief, luminous, and irreversibly fragile. Heather Pfister was a small presence, a child in a domestic moment, included for warmth rather than plot. Heather O'Rourke, born December 27, 1975, in San Diego, California, was only 7 when she appeared, bringing the unguarded naturalness that exists briefly in very young performers before the camera teaches them to perform. Already recognized through Poltergeist, she seemed to stand at the threshold of a long career. That future closed without warning. On February 1, 1988, she died at just 12 years old from complications caused by a misdiagnosed bowel obstruction. That knowledge reframes every moment of her screen time. The sweetness becomes something harder to witness, a child who never crossed into the future the camera seemed to promise. In a show designed entirely for comfort, her story belongs to a different world. In 2026, Happy Days exists in 2 places simultaneously. On screen, it remains exactly what it always was, a Milwaukee of eternal afternoons, where familiar faces never age and the door is never locked. Off-screen, the years moved through the people who built it with complete indifference to what they had created. Some are still here, others are gone, taken at different points, by different circumstances, some far too early to be understood as anything other than loss. What the reruns offer isn't denial. It's something more complicated. A place where time agreed to stop, and everyone stayed exactly as they were. If one particular face brought you back today, you already know exactly why. That is what those shows do. They give you somewhere to return to,